not on social media, but every once in a while, even if I scroll some YouTube in between any good content that I'm trying to take in, like learning, I've noticed things like these that are posted on social media. Pictures where people are getting caught lying about what they're doing. Has anyone seen these? So, like, of course, his picture is a beach day, and then his, like, family or sibling takes a picture of him out there. He's clearly not at the beach, and then they post it and completely call him out in the comment section. I think we have another one, a few of these here. I really didn't mean to post this. I can't remember what SMH means. Shaking my head. There we go. Good. I'm not on social media, so... but whatever, good morning. And the person's like, it's like a 5-step process to post a picture. How could you accidentally do this right now? A couple more. A photo of my mom in 1974. There's an iPhone in her hand. So, not possible. I love this next one. Sun was in my eyes, LOL, but my favorite picture. If the sun was in your eyes, then why is the shadow in front of you? And you could just keep going on these over and over and over again. And each of these are trying to demonstrate or communicate something to the onlooking world, to the people around them. They're trying to say something about themselves that, unfortunately for them, they got caught in the reality that it is not true. That what they can be on the outside of projection may not be the inwardly or even the external reality of really where they're at. We've been journeying through the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus' famous teaching. So either a longtime Christian or maybe someone trying to discover faith, I think this is one of the greatest places to learn about Jesus, to learn about what Jesus talks about most. And over again, what we see is that Jesus is a genius, that he is actually the best at managing life the way that it really is. These would be images or demonstrations of those that are trying to manage life maybe the way that it is not. They're trying to make it something that is not true. And Jesus, actually, thousands of years ago, has something to say to these people who post something that is not true. And he has much to say about those who might be living in a certain way that is not truly connected to their inward life. I know you can look out at an onlooking world and you can see a disconnect in people. You can look at the ways in which they act, and then you can look at the words that they use, and you could say that those don't line up. You can also look at people performing something or doing something that may not actually be true of their inward life, but something gets pulled out of them in a certain way. And Jesus gets pretty harsh. He says to a group of folks, when you fast, we'll get to what fasting is in a second, do not look somber as the hypocrites do. Jesus very quickly in this portion of the Sermon on the Mount is calling a group of people hypocrites. Again, we might think people who say one thing and do another. What he's saying is that there's a group of people that essentially are wearing masks in their life. It's as if they're in a great drama or they're in a play and they have these masks. They're pretending to be a character in which they truly are not. Do you ever feel like you wear masks in certain places? One of the great phenomenon of being an adult as you grow up is there's this thing that maybe when you go back to your family of origin, you start to become more like the child that you once were in that family of origin. Does anyone ever feel that? I don't know about you, but I love my mom. She's online potentially this morning, broke her leg a while ago, has faithfully been watching online. She still says good job after Sundays. But there's something that even in that place, my mom is a loving mother, a doting mother, a caring mother, and I can go and I can just sit back on the couch as if my mom just does all things for me still. Like I quickly, like I have no responsibility very quickly. There's fun little cute ways. There's also some harmful ways in which we can go back to an unformed self or a less formed self. But he's saying that people tend to wear masks in certain ways. Maybe you tend to wear masks around certain groups of friends. Maybe you tend to wear masks at your work. Maybe there is a mask wearing on your street or in the public places in which you go that doesn't always feel aligned or true to who you are. And Jesus, specifically right now, is calling out piety, the idea of being a good and religious, virtuous person. And you had the paid religious professionals in the time, the Pharisees and the Sadducees, who were pious people. They knew all the things, they did all the things, they were prayerful, they did everything according to the book. And yet Jesus called them hypocrites. One of the greatest daggers he could point to them. And he's saying to them and to the onlooking crowd, when you fast, he's assuming for those following the ways of Jesus that there's a spiritual practice of fasting happening in their life. He also talks about prayer, and he also talks about almsgiving just before this, which is giving to the poor and to the marginalized. Saying, when you fast, do not be like the hypocrites. Do not wear a mask, for they disfigure their faces to show others they are fasting. Truly, I tell you, they have received their reward in full. This word disfigure essentially means to make invisible. So you actually cannot see who they are anymore. Now, fasting culturally in this time was great. I'll get into the history in just a second. But one of even the points of fasting in the time of an agrarian culture that relied heavily on rain so that they could get crop and so they could eat, there were people who fasted for rain. So guess what happened? When rain came, it was thanks to those who fasted for the rain. Guess who got a lot of applause when the rain would come? Those fasting for the rain. You see how quickly it can go to the head? That's something that you could do for religious benefit. Something that could be done so that you can experience more of God can very quickly become an applause to me, an applause of man. But truly I tell you, they have received their reward in full. If what you and I are looking for is human applause, we'll simply get that. And that's the end. If what you want most is for others to see you in a certain way, good job, they'll see you in a certain way, that's what you'll get. If there's some kind of a prestige, if there's some kind of an outward appearance, if there's something that you're good at that you want to be known for, good job, you'll be known for that. But you and I both know that there's still something we long for even after someone might see us in a certain light. Even when someone can compliment you of something, yet you still might feel a bit empty inside. Even when you sacrifice greatly to put on an image to get to a certain point in life, you still feel like you're lacking of more. Over and over again, Jesus is saying that the life with me, a life with God, is not about the masks that you wear. It's about who you're becoming. Who you're becoming. And out of that, you and I might be the people in which he's inviting us to be that do the things that are good, that are right, that are blessings to other people, that are good, beautiful, and kind. Now, really quickly, fasting in its simplest form, long definition here, is not eating food. Just not eating. It's actually abstaining from food for a set period of time, for short or for long. It's the idea that I will not eat food. That's it. Any questions? Fasting is not eating food. Now, you and I are familiar with fasting in a lot of ways. I'm doing this thing called 75 Hard right now. I try not to say that out loud because it's the stupidest name ever. And I have to be careful around certain people that will absolutely make fun of me when that gets said. And they say so many things that you can imagine about this coin of 75 Hard. Anyways, you pick a diet and you stick to it. It's just any diet, right? You work out 2 exercises a day for 45 minutes. No drinking of alcohol. You take a progress photo each day, the most awkward part about it. You drink a gallon of water and you read 10 pages of a book. I'm like 98.5% doing great, okay? With this, it's a type of fasting. People would call it fasting. Maybe, does anyone do intermittent fasting? The idea that you eat within about a 6, 8, 12, maybe 12-hour window, and then you don't eat outside of that, and you're hoping your body gets to a certain point of eating certain things in it so that you can become more healthy, lose weight, whatever it is. There's so many social media fasts. You might fast chocolate and Lent. We can keep going down the list. We're familiar with it greatly culturally as something that oftentimes is for the sake of our gut. That could be a way of putting it. What we're less familiar with is fasting as a way of connecting with God. And culturally in this moment, everybody fasted that was in Jewish culture. It was ingrained in who they were. They would actually fast 2 days a week. Here's a brief history. The other thing is that fasting is a part of all major religions: Judaism, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and then a lot of indigenous spiritual practices incorporate fasting. We see it throughout the Old Testament, starting in the book of Exodus. Moses fasted for 40 days on Mount Sinai, and then it's followed by the command for all Israel to fast on the Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. There are stories of fasting all through OT with main characters: Moses, David, Samuel, Esther, and the prophets. Jesus, when he actually comes on the scene, he starts with a 40-day fast. This would be a callback to the 40-day fast of Moses, Jesus being the new Moses. By the time of Jesus, it was common practice for the Jews to fast twice a week. This beginning would have actually been on Mondays and Thursdays, and then it later changes to Wednesdays and Fridays. For a lot of reasons I'm not going to get into today. And then the early church continued to practice this. The Didache was actually a church manual for how churches were to operate, and one of the things that it said to do as a church was to fast regularly, these Wednesdays and these Fridays. Fasting is a part of the lineage of life with God. Now, here's the interesting thing, and I want to say a few things here. One, Jesus never commands you and I to fast. There is not a telling us that to be a certain thing, that fasting is mandatory. The other reality is that even in this room, potentially, there are people with physical needs that do not allow you to fast from food. And so this isn't I need to overcome this sickness and I need to fast because it's the spiritual thing to do. Fasting, I think, is a part of being wise and also consulting medical professionals on the impact of what this could have in your life. So it is not commanded to fast. Yet, common practice of the church, of the followers before us, and Jesus even notes here, when you fast, it is assumed that they would pick this up. And at the same time, if you start to get bored here, I'm sorry. Those that were following Jesus in that moment actually get accused for not fasting. The people that were hanging out with Jesus, that were considered his students, his disciples, yet a bunch of religious professionals come to Jesus and say, hey, why don't your guys fast? The guys of John fasted, others fasting, why don't? And he goes on to say, why would you fast when I am here? Meaning that fasting is reserved for special and unique times, not all the time. Why would those fast while I'm here? One day will come when they will fast. Meaning that when Jesus is not with us, fasting will pick back up. So, fasting was a part of regularly scheduled rhythms in the ancient church, the historic church, and it was reserved for something special when we do not have Jesus walking physically side by side with us as the early disciples did. So, with that said, the interesting thing, if we go a little bit further, is that fasting actually connects with our body in a certain way. We talked a little bit about intermittent fasting. You're narrowing your window of eating so that your body starts to do a certain thing to itself for the sake of health. And then if you go for 16 hours with food, you get to a point of ketosis. And that's where, again, it starts to kind of eat its own fat and some other things. But if you go longer for 24 hours, you get to autophagy. And this is a Greek term that literally means self-eating. So your body starts to eat itself. It's a fascinating concept. But the way of describing it is that your body is taking out the trash. When you get to a 24-hour period of not eating, something starts to happen in your body. It was designed to take out dead cells, bad cells. It's a way in which your body naturally fights cancer cells. This is something that seems to be designed by God that is unique and means something for us. So it can cleanse your body of toxins, increase your metabolism, reduce your weight. It can lower your insulin levels, inflammation and blood pressure, strengthen your immune system, reduce your heart rate, and slow aging. It can protect against and possibly reverse many diseases such as diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and a range of neurological disorders, including Alzheimer's. It's almost as if fasting was meant for the body, or maybe even that the body was meant for fasting. That there's something there for you and I to pay attention to. Now, again, we brought up some of the fads of fasting. The goal is not, again, just for the sake of our gut. In our own day, fasting seems to have lost something of its spiritual meaning and has taken on, in a culture characterized by the search for material well-being, a therapeutic value for the care of one's body. Fasting certainly brings benefits to physical well-being, but for believers, it is in the first place a therapy to heal all that prevents them from conformity to the will of God. Said very clearly, you can absolutely have gain in certain fastings physically, yet it can at the same time fall short of what God might want to do in your life through something like fasting. Jesus goes on to say, but when you fast, put oil on your head and wash your face. In other words, brush your teeth, comb your hair, put on some clothes. Like, do not start to make yourself look extra bad so that people go like, oh man, look at them, they're fasting, they're so holy. Because again, you'll get that if that's what you want. So that it will not be obvious to others, but only to your Father who is unseen, and your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. Jesus, again, in the Sermon on the Mount, grabs practices that very quickly can have religious people become play actors. My wife, Caitlin, I didn't ask her for permission for this story. I hope this one is okay. It's actually more about me and my family than it is her. But she had just mentioned when we started dating and when we started to go to church and when she started to come around my family and learn that I grew up in and around the church and that my parents were a part of the church, one of her first thoughts was, I don't belong here because they must have all of their stuff together. Play acting in the church, I think, becomes a great deterrent to those who God is trying to actually reach and connect with. Because how many people look at the church and say, I don't belong there. They must have their stuff together. I have to figure out these broken parts of my life before I enter in there. One of the things I think God is pointing to is that this separates people. It grabs to the shame and the guilt of folks who are looking on to the church. The tendency then also is for those in the church to now start to feel like they have it all together. We need to look a certain way. We need to talk a certain way. We need to start to behave and perform a certain way. Because what if someone didn't think I was a part of the church? Well, I need to look different. And now it becomes us play acting. We have a mask. We had a guest a couple weeks ago, David Parker, and wise man, well older than me. And one of the things he said is when he early came to faith in his life, in his, I think it was about his 20s, he said something very fascinating. He said, I've noticed that when we come to faith, when we become Christians, when we start to follow Jesus, there's this line. There's a line in which I'm not in life with God, and then we cross over this line into life with God. And then the goal is, from this line here, I now need to move as far away as possible from that line. I need to become more pure, more morally right, have the ways of my life be aligned with God, whatever it is. Less cigarettes, less cussing. You just keep going away from this line of morality. And he said, I found it really interesting, though, because I always felt like I crossed over that line, but I just stayed right alongside it my entire life, even to today. And what I heard him say in that is that it's a strong line in which he crossed over, but at the same time, it's the one that keeps him so close and to a reminder that without God, without a Savior, without a rescuer, he is in great depravity and in high need. That my life doesn't just all of a sudden become more moral. I stay close to the line of the saving grace in which God has extended to me. It's a posture of humility. It's a posture of not putting a mask on and trying to become something. Now, what I will say is the closer you stay to that line and as you grow up, your behavior does start to change. I believe there is something in God's Spirit starts to work inside of you that people start to notice something different in your life. But it may not be the moral things as much as we think it is, but it's the things that says, why do you seem to have hope in times of chaos? How are you being generous towards a person that has harmed you? Why is forgiveness so readily accessible to you? Why would you give money to some organizations when your own bank account's a little bit tight right now? It becomes these things that you're stepping into a new way of life that looks more like the one that Jesus is inviting you and I into. So I have 3 things. I'm going to do these fairly quickly, and then we're going to go into a time of prayer. First, fasting reminds us of our need. In this image of the line and crossing over, I think David Parker said well, there is never a moment in my life in which I don't need something. And what can happen very quickly is we have legitimate need that we oftentimes try to fill in illegitimate ways. I feel a little bit out of control, so I'm going to go on a shopping spree. It's a way of gaining control. I feel tired and disconnected. I'm going to find a way to numb the pain through some kind of external mechanism, whether a bottle or a website. I have need of deep connection with other people. And so therefore I'll find it in certain ways that have me compromise the way God designed me to be. We can keep going down this list. We have great need. And when we're out of touch with that need, we will look for illegitimate ways, and that's us putting on a mask to say, this is what I need, and when actually God's saying, no, you need to be whole. You need to have peace. I have these things for you. And very quickly, we can become this person of, I can take care of my own needs. I'll work harder, I'll make more, I'll do more. I'll just keep going so that I actually may not ever even feel or become in touch with my needs. But to be in life with Jesus, it is the admittance over and over again that I have need and I cannot fulfill my own needs. I cannot do it. Fasting reminds us to act. There is something here, the connection, one of the declines of fasting in the Western church was around the Enlightenment, where we started to view religion, God, as knowledge. Everyone had ways of understanding science. We now could read the scriptures for ourselves, and we in the West become very heady in a lot of ways. And what happens in that is we actually disconnect from our bodies and the way in which God designed us and intended us. I already went over some of the ways in which fasting impacts us physiologically. And this is a piece in which my feet, my hands, my mouth, all these things are deeply connected, if not mostly connected, because they demonstrate the faith and the belief in which I have here. My soul, my heart, my mind. That we are to actually be people of action, and fasting can actually help place us in that. I love this quote. How shall we have the means to help our brother who is in need? How can we do without those unnecessary things which become habits, cigarettes, liquor, coffee, tea, candy, sodas, soft drinks, and those foods at meals which only titillate the palate? It's the only time I use the word titillate when I read this quote. I just realized that. We all have these habits, the youngest and the oldest, and we have to die to ourselves in order to live. We have to put off the old man and put on the Christ. What would it look like that you calculate the math in what you do for a lunch that you fast from, and then you take that $3, $5, $7, $12 or whatever it is, and you put it in a pour box in your home, and then that's what you use to give throughout the month as your alms giving, above and beyond any giving you do to the church or organizations. It actually draws you towards other people, and it's a way of standing and connecting with the poor. From Guinea-Bissau to Haiti, to actually walking streets. I remember buying rice in Haiti from a family who they knew that in that moment, they were going to be able to pay for something they need. They did not know if they were going to get that money again the next day. And it was a way, fasting is a reminder that not everyone gets to eat today. How much do you and I need that? To be reminded that we are in such a unique space and time here in the United States in this day and age. Many people go to sleep hungry every night, not knowing if they're going to eat tomorrow. Fasting reminds us to receive, lastly, that you and I are in a posture. It says that the Father will actually give blessing, that we will receive something from Him in and through this, and that this life with God is to be something received. The posture is that I cannot do this on my own. I cannot attain the peace and the desires in which God would actually have for me on my own, and I am here to receive. And fasting puts us in a posture to say, God, I am pushing this out for the sake of experiencing you in whatever it is. Some of our leadership, our board of trustees, our senior leadership, myself and a couple others are going through strategic planning on behalf of the church over a 9-week period. We meet every 3 Fridays. And one of the things I invited some of our group to do is to fast on those days, so that when we show up in that space, that we're just a little bit more open to what God might have for us. We're not saying, God, I'm putting aside this meal so that you do X, Y, Z. It's saying, I want to enter into this space a little bit more in tune with not myself. That's maybe the bigger thing. And so can you and I have habits? Maybe for you, it'd be join us in our fasting and strategic planning. Maybe coming this Friday, skip breakfast. Maybe skip breakfast and lunch. Maybe skip lunch. Take those few bucks, set it aside, and decide how to hand that out the following week. These are ways in which you and I, could you imagine a life where weekly or monthly you and I had a practice in which we set aside time, and if not food, may it be technology next. You and I are over-dependent, over-connected. The dopamine that our phones give us. What if you shut your phone off for an hour a day? What if you shut it off for 4 hours once a week? I don't know what it is for you, but is there something that you can set aside and say, this is where I usually fill my needs, and I want to find it in another way? Therefore, physical fasting frees us for spiritual nourishment. And I should say, physical fasting, for the sake of spirituality, because we talked about the other physical facts, actually free us for spiritual nourishment, the food in which Jesus would actually have us nourish on. Can we be people who start to consider fasting if you have not yet? I've tried on many. I've done short fasts, long fasts. I had a rhythm of Wednesdays and Fridays for a season of my life, doing the Fridays right now through strategic planning. It ebbs, it flows. Every time it's hard. It doesn't just like click and all of a sudden I'm like floating in the sky. Like it is a thing in which, but it's denying of self. The last thing, and then I'm going to transition to a time of prayer, is that one of the things that fasting came up in the tradition of the church is through grief and loss and actual mourning. That fasting was a practice of mourning. It was also a practice of preparation. When people entered into the waters of baptism, they'd be invited to fast a couple days leading up to that. The one doing the baptism, which is now a regular practice of mine, would fast leading up to baptisms, which we have coming up on November 16th. But the mourning, the grief, the loss, there's something in which people would set aside the natural way and the natural things in which they depend on, so that in times of grief, loss, and mourning, they could actually connect with God. Where do you turn to when you're in mourning? When things don't go the way that you don't want them to, when things are hard, when they hurt, when there's pain. This is a way of first and foremost coming in touch with the pain in your life that we tend to want to gloss over and skip by. And then it's a way of working through it with the one who can bring comfort, with the one who will one day wipe every tear, with the God who is with those who mourn, and with those who weep, and with those who are the brokenhearted. I think this is a season that I'm in personally. An announcement, sad and an unexpected one this week, is that we lost a congregant in our church. See, I thought I cried out my tears this week. Paul Dunham passed on Tuesday. A number of you in the room know this, some don't. He's he and his wife Kathleen are Caitlin and I's neighbors for the last 11 years. If you've seen him here, it's probably because he's made coffee. We looked back, 144 Sundays since the end of 2021. It's a lot of Sundays. It's a lot of coffee. Amen. He was just a constant presence. His last words to me on Monday, actually, I was with him, and then he went in for a routine stress test on his heart for an upcoming surgery, and he actually passed on the treadmill. His last words to me, I was with him on Monday. He was boxing some stuff up and doing random projects, and I asked him about some cabinet doors I needed to reface, and I asked, can we bring him by and work in your shop? And he goes, you know me, I'm always around. I'm just so thankful for that comment, because there's something about his life, and that was true. He was just there. And how much that matters, to have people that are just there. And what I'm realizing now is, even as I bring this up, there's people in this room this week, this month, this year who have lost people who were always there. Kathleen, she's not here this morning, his wife. She was contemplating, do I come to church this morning? She's going through all this stuff. We got to talk about it. She's in good spirit. She's grieving, I think, in healthy ways. I was there within minutes of her hearing the news. She called his sister and brother-in-law from Clovis to come pick her up, and then she called me, and I happened to be on my porch reading at the time, which I was thankful for. And I get there, and she's just praying. She's actually praying out loud, talking to God about the thing in which she just heard minutes ago, that her husband had just passed unexpectedly. She was waiting for him to come home in about 30 minutes. And she began to pray and to hope and to know the life in which Paul lived and the one that he currently lives now. And that does not take away the grief. I think when we're reminded of the Amazing Grace lyrics here, when we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. These are moments to think about. What will you be doing 10,000 years from now? And may that be something that breaks into today. It breaks backwards into today. That we can be people that are there, that are present, that are a blessing, that are ready to help, on and on and on. And so what I wanted to do is I just wanted to pray, but what I also wanted to do is, if there's anyone else in this room, it might be related to Paul, but if there's someone else carrying grief and loss this year from someone that you lost, I would love for you to stand also. And then I would love to have a few people just get around and pray for those who stand. So again, it might be Paul, it might be someone else, but may this be a moment in which we come in touch with the pain, the grief, and the loss. So if that's you, can you just please stand? And then we'll have a few people around us lay hands on you, and I can kind of guide our time of prayer. Is that anybody else this morning? My wife, Caitlin. Sandy. Is anybody else? It's good news if we don't have, I guess it's good news in so many ways. A ton of people standing. Yeah, Debbie. Anybody else? Good. If we can, as the rest of the worship team starts coming up, if we get a handful of people that are in and around and willing, can you just go to some of the people that are standing? And let's just lay a hand on their shoulder to start with. One of the things that I think is unique to a church is that we don't try to fix things all the time when they're broken and heavy and painful. But we believe that there's some things that only God can do, because these aren't times of cheap statements, of trying to bypass the pain. But we believe that God can come and comfort, that he can bring peace and hope, that he can bring redemptive stories to people's lives as we look back on them, and that he can do formation in and through us when we come in touch with pain and the reality of life and the way in which God did not intend them to be. So with hands on their shoulders, we just say, Spirit, come. God, it's you who are close to the weary, the brokenhearted, the heavy laden. And it's you who will one day wipe all tears away, that we may see the heavens in which they are intended to be here on earth. And so we just ask for your comfort and your peace to come now. For each person grieving, for each person navigating life with someone not there. We ask for your grace and your confidence. We ask for memories and dreams. That pain and loss, that we can be people who come and touch it with it for really what it is, not to avoid it, but that we can also see through it, the way in which you've designed it, God. That life continues to the full, fuller than we could ever imagine. And so may we be reminded of their lives lived. May we be reminded of what was broken, what was good, what brought joy. May we, with watching eyes, learn from their lives. May we carry on what's good and beautiful and right. And may we become more appreciative of our own life, the life of others. May we become more in touch with the dignity and the value of each person and how much you love them. And may we be spurred on as people of compassion and mercy to share that love and that hope, Lord. So come. Bring your mercy. Bring your comfort. We trust you. We give them to you. We offer ourselves to you for you to have your way with our lives. It's in your kingdom and your love we pray. Amen. 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 Good job, church. May we be a space in which people can navigate the realities of life, that we do not have to turn away from them, but we can enter in, not alone, but together, because it's not a matter of if, but it's a matter of when loss comes in our life. And there's a God who sees all of it and is present in all of it, wants to heal and redeem in all of it. So why don't we stand together? Let's sing this song, and then I'll come up and just close us out and send us into this week.